They came not with kindness but with commands. The phone would buzz on the wooden nightstand by his bed, short, clipped messages written as if they were dispatch orders rather than requests from family. Pick us up at 7, don't be late. Drop Erica at the salon, wait in the car. Swing by after work, Logan doesn't want to Uber tonight. Martin Lowell, 62 years old, widowed for nearly a decade, would sit on the edge of his bed and stare at those glowing words on the small screen. No greeting, no pleas, just instructions, as though his role in life after decades of sweat was reduced to that of a driver on call, and he answered always with the same resigned response, "Okay." Before we step deeper into Martin's story, let me pause and welcome you to Family Shadows, a place where untold family dramas unfold, where quiet fathers and forgotten mothers reveal the unseen sacrifices they've carried for years. Here, we believe every shadow holds a lesson and every story is a mirror. If you find yourself moved by the lives of these silent heroes, I invite you, gently, sincerely, to subscribe to Family Shadows. Join us so you won't miss the next story that might just reflect a piece of your own. Now, let us return to Martin, and to a title that might feel familiar, or perhaps even sting a little if you've ever been taken for granted. My daughter-in-law said I was just their free driver, so I sold the car and took back my time. Martin Lowell's house sat at the edge of a quiet street outside Tacoma, Washington, about 40 miles south of Seattle. The neighborhood was lined with aging maples whose branches bent low over cracked sidewalks, their roots pushing up squares of concrete like forgotten knuckles. The houses here were modest, one-story ranches with peeling paint, small porches, and cars parked in driveways that had seen better days. Martin's own driveway was occupied by a forest green Ford Taurus, a car he'd kept in immaculate condition. Oil changed every 3,000 miles. Tires rotated like clockwork. He had polished the dashboard so often that it caught the sun like glass. The Taurus was more than a car. It was a companion. It had carried his late wife, Janine, to her doctor appointments when cancer was slowly dimming her light. It had ferried his son Logan to basketball games in high school, Zoe's father before Zoe was even born. It had hauled groceries, lumber, furniture, and once, a Christmas tree strapped comically to its roof. For Martin, it wasn't just steel and rubber, it was memory. But for Logan and his wife Erica, the car was simply convenient. That Tuesday morning, the ping came early. Pick Erica up at 9. Salon. Martin read it as he poured himself a second cup of Folgers into a chipped mug with the words, "World's Best Dad," fading on the side. He traced the mug with his thumb. Logan had given it to him for Father's Day years ago before the tone between them turned from love to assumption. He typed back, "Okay." At 8:50 a.m., he was parked outside Erica's townhouse, the Taurus idling quietly. Erica appeared in her high-heeled boots, scrolling her phone, not looking up until she reached the passenger side. "Traffic's bad, so don't take the highway," she said, sliding in. "And wait for me after. It should only be an hour." Martin nodded. While Erica was inside, Martin waited in the car. He could have gone for coffee, maybe strolled a nearby park, but he knew if she came out early and he wasn't there, she'd make a comment. Why weren't you waiting? That's the whole point. So he stayed, scrolling the same news app, listening to the hum of the air vents. He thought of his old friend Rick, who had called last week, inviting him to coffee that very morning. "Come on, Marty," Rick had said. The old days. Just two retired grease monkeys swapping stories. Martin had declined because of this errand, because of a text. That evening, Zoe, his 8-year-old granddaughter, came bounding into his house. Her curls bounced as she flopped onto his recliner. "Grandpa," she giggled, "Mom says you're the family driver, like Uber but free." She laughed, not unkindly but in the innocent way children repeat what they hear. Martin smiled faintly, ruffling her hair, but inside something cracked. Uber, free. He had given his life to keep his family moving forward, and now in their eyes he was just the wheels. As Martin drove back that night, the dashboard lights casting a soft glow on his tired face, he thought of all the roads behind him. The nights he'd worked overtime fixing engines at the shop so Logan could have new cleats. The Sundays Janine had packed sandwiches for long drives to state fairs. The miles and miles he had logged, not just in the Taurus but in every vehicle before it, carrying his family quite literally through their lives. Now all of that condensed to 3 words on a phone screen: "Pick us up." And that was only the beginning. The next Saturday should have been Martin's. Rick had called again on Friday evening, his voice light but insistent. "Come on, Marty. We'll hit that little diner off Main Street. Same spot we used to stop at after work. You need a morning for yourself." Martin had almost said yes. He had even pictured the bottomless coffee, the smell of frying bacon, the chatter of old men at booths recalling baseball games from the 70s. But then his phone lit up. "Dad, Erica needs a ride to the spa at 9. Can you take her?" No question mark. No apology for the short notice. Just another dispatch typed out as if he were an employee instead of a father. Martin stared at the message. He rubbed his thumb across the screen the way he used to wipe grease off the edge of a wrench. His chest felt heavy. He typed slowly, "Okay." At 8:45, the Taurus purred to life. He drove through the drizzle, windshield wipers squeaking across the glass. The road to Logan and Erica's townhouse was familiar now. Too familiar. He knew the curve past the grocery store, the pothole near the stoplight, the exact spot where the morning sun broke through the clouds and caught on the hood of the car. Erica stepped outside right on time, dressed in a cream sweater dress and tall boots. She waved absently, phone pressed to her ear, walking briskly. She opened the car door mid-sentence, slid in, and continued talking as if Martin were part of the upholstery. "Yes, I told her I want the full package. Facial, nails, everything. Oh, Dad's driving me now. I'll be there in 10. She hung up. "Take the scenic road, traffic's better." Martin nodded. The spa was one of those polished storefronts in a new strip mall, all frosted glass and minimalist signage. Martin pulled into the drop-off lane. Erica adjusted her sunglasses, finally glancing at him. "It'll be a while, maybe 3 hours. You can wait out here or, I don't know, walk around." He managed a polite smile. "Take your time." "Thanks, Dad." She leaned over and tapped the dashboard lightly like she was signaling to a driver for good service. "We'll call when I'm done." The door closed. She disappeared inside. Martin sat for a long while in the parked car. A radio commercial blared about discounts on new trucks. He turned it off. The silence pressed in. He thought again of Rick, probably laughing over his second plate of pancakes by now. He thought of Janine, who used to scold him for skipping his own joys. Life's not just about keeping others moving, Marty. Sometimes you've got to park, too. His fingers drummed the steering wheel, but he stayed. By the time Erica emerged, 3 hours later, Martin was stiff. He unfolded himself from the seat, joints aching, and walked around to open the trunk for her shopping bags. She slid into the passenger seat, scrolling her phone again. "You didn't leave?" she asked, surprised. Martin shook his head. "Didn't want to miss you." She shrugged. "Well, that's good, saves me calling an Uber." That evening, Logan called. "Hey Dad, thanks for today. Listen, tomorrow can you drop Zoe at her friend's house? Erica and I have brunch plans. Should be quick, just across town." Martin glanced at his worn calendar pinned to the fridge. A doctor's note was written in small, neat letters. "Cardiology, 10:30 a.m. He hesitated. "Dad," Logan's voice sharpened. "It's not a big deal, just a drop-off. You've got the time, right?" Martin swallowed. "Yes, I'll do it." The next morning, Zoe climbed into the back seat with her pink backpack. She leaned forward between the seats, her small hands resting on her grandfather's shoulders. "Grandpa," she whispered, "Mom says you're our family driver, like Uber but free." She giggled, her innocent laughter filling the car. Martin forced a smile, ruffling her hair. "Well, I guess that makes you my favorite passenger." Zoe beamed. But when he dropped her off and watched her run toward her friend's door, the smile fell from his face. Because even in Zoe's sweet voice, he could hear the echo of Erica's words. Family driver, free. And Martin knew, whatever he had once been in their eyes, father, provider, husband, he was now just a steering wheel and a set of keys. Sunday dinners had once been sacred in the Lowell household. When Janine was alive, she would roast a chicken and fill the kitchen with the smell of thyme and garlic, with laughter bubbling over the clatter of plates. Martin had carried on the tradition after she passed, clumsily at first, then more steadily, as if keeping the ritual alive was the only way to keep her in the room. But now dinners were different. Erica and Logan brought their own conversations, half complaints about work, half plans for renovations they couldn't quite afford. Zoe, bless her, tried to chatter about school and her drawings, but her parents rarely listened for long. And Martin, he cooked, he served, he sat, and he stayed quiet. That evening he made pot roast. It was a recipe from an old stained card Janine had written in her looping script. He had browned the beef just the way she used to, adding onions until they were soft and sweet. The aroma filled the house by late afternoon, and Martin felt almost proud, almost hopeful that maybe tonight there would be warmth again. The table was set simply, chipped china, mismatched forks, the linen napkins Janine had insisted they save for family. Erica pushed a piece of carrot around her plate with her fork. "You know, Logan, maybe we should just order in next week. It'd save Dad all this trouble." Martin glanced up. "It's no trouble, I like cooking." Erica gave a polite smile. "Of course, I just mean things change, we don't have to do everything the old way." Logan shrugged, sipping his beer. "Besides, Dad likes keeping busy. If he didn't have this stuff, driving us, cooking dinners, I don't know what else he'd do." The words stung more than Martin expected. He had fixed engines until his hands were raw. He had balanced bills through lean years with math that only love could make work. He had sat by his wife's hospital bed night after night. And to his son, all of that seemed boiled down to keeping busy. Erica set her fork down. "You should be grateful, Martin, that we give you things to do. Otherwise, honestly, what would you have? Retired men get lost if they don't stay useful." The room went silent. Even Zoe froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. Martin lowered his eyes. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his glass of water. He wanted to answer, to say he had given them everything, his youth, his money, his sleep, his very body worn thin from years under the hood of cars, but the words caught in his throat. He only managed a faint nod, as if conceding that maybe they were right. Zoe spoke softly, her small voice cutting through the quiet. "Grandpa makes the best roast." "Mommy, don't you think so?" Erica blinked, caught off guard. She smiled at her daughter, then forced herself to take another bite. "Yes, sweetie, it's good. But the damage had been done. Martin chewed slowly, tasting nothing. His eyes drifted to Janine's photograph on the mantel in the next room. Her smile, frozen in a frame, seemed to say, "Don't let them take your dignity, Marty." And in that moment, the pot roast, the dinner table, even the Sunday tradition, all of it felt fragile, as if it could crumble with just one more careless word. That night, after the plates were cleared and Zoe tucked into bed, Martin stood alone in his kitchen. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. He picked up the dish towel, drying the last glass, and placed it in the cupboard with careful precision. His hands trembled slightly, but he told himself it was only the arthritis, not the weight of his heart. He sat down at the worn oak table, the same table he and Janine had bought at a garage sale 40 years earlier, sanding it down together, laughing when the stain dripped too dark in some places. He traced a groove in the wood with his finger, remembering. On the counter nearby lay a neat stack of envelopes. Martin reached for them. They weren't bills anymore. He had long since paid off the house, whittled down debts, lived modestly so there would be little to worry about. These envelopes were insurance statements, car registration, maintenance receipts, fuel logs, all of it in his name. For years, he had quietly carried the costs of the green Taurus, insurance premiums, every oil change, every new tire. Logan and Erica never asked how it was paid, and Martin never told them. They assumed, perhaps, that the car simply existed like a utility, free and endless. He flipped through the papers, pausing at a receipt from last winter. $640 for a brake job. He remembered that day vividly, how Logan had called in the middle of the repair, asking if Martin could pick Erica up from work. Martin had left the shop still greasy, driving a loaner car with tools rattling in the trunk just to get her there on time. No one had ever asked how much it cost. No one had ever said thank you. On the corner of the table was a folded note from his doctor. Follow-up appointment, cardiology, 10:30 a.m., January 14. Martin sighed. He had canceled that very appointment once before, months earlier. Erica had called in a panic. "Dad, we forgot to book an airport shuttle. Can you take us? It's just one time." It was never just one time. He had called the doctor's office, voice hoarse with apology, rescheduled the exam. And then he had risen at 4:30 in the morning, scraped ice off the Taurus windshield, and driven Logan and Erica through the dark to SeaTac. They had dozed in the back seat, heads tilted toward each other while Martin's chest tightened with every mile. When he dropped them at the departure's curb, Erica had said, "Thanks, Dad," distracted, already pulling her suitcase. Logan had given a half-wave, more to his phone than his father. Martin had sat there after they vanished through the sliding glass doors, watching other families embrace in long hugs, hearing the echoes of "We love you, Dad." He had driven home alone, the dashboard glowing faintly in the winter dawn. He leaned back in his chair now, closing his eyes. His mind wandered to Zoe. Sweet Zoe, who loved riding in the back seat, her shoes tapping the leather, asking questions about every street sign. She didn't know the words insurance premium or registration renewal. She only knew Grandpa always showed up, and maybe that was enough for her. But for Logan and Erica, they saw none of it. They didn't see the extra shifts Martin had worked after Janine's diagnosis, just to keep up with the bills. They didn't know that the Taurus had been nearly repossessed once, before Martin sold his prized set of tools to cover the payment. They didn't realize that every free ride came at the cost of his time, his money, his health. Invisible sacrifices. piled one atop the other, until they became part of the foundation his children now stood on, without ever glancing down to see what held them up. Martin opened a drawer and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. Inside, in his careful handwriting, were pages of expenses, notes, and reminders. He flipped to the most recent entry: gas $1.52, insurance renewal $1.040, oil change $1.89, Logan plus Erica no contribution. He stared at the words. He wasn't angry at the money itself. He could live frugally. He always had. What gnawed at him was the way his silence had turned into expectation. His giving had become invisible, and invisible things were too easily forgotten. He closed the notebook gently, as if laying a child to rest. The clock ticked past midnight. Martin rose, stretched his aching back, and turned off the kitchen light. As he walked down the hallway, the glow of Janine's photo caught his eye once more. Her face, smiling in a floral dress, seemed to whisper a truth he had ignored too long. "They don't see, Marty, but you know. You always know." And for the first time he wondered if it was time to stop carrying the unseen. The January wind rattled the windows of Martin's house, shaking loose a thin line of frost from the gutters. He sat in his recliner with a plaid blanket over his legs, the leather notebook open once more on his lap. He had been rereading old entries, almost as if searching for proof that his sacrifices were real, that he hadn't imagined a lifetime of giving. The clock read 10:52 p.m. He closed the notebook, ready to shuffle off to bed, when his phone buzzed on the side table. The sound startled him in the quiet. A message from Logan. "Pick us up at 5 a.m. airport." No greeting, no explanation, just the familiar shorthand of command. Martin stared at the glowing letters. His doctor's appointment card was still pinned to the fridge, written in his own careful hand. "Cardiology, 10:30 a.m. He typed slowly. "I can't. I have an appointment." The reply came within seconds, as if Logan had been waiting. "Dad, seriously, it's one ride. Don't be selfish for once." Selfish. The word struck him harder than any insult before. He had been many things: tired, stubborn, quiet, but never selfish. His entire life had been a ledger of giving: hours, paychecks, love, miles. To be called selfish now for protecting one single morning felt like a knife slipped between old scars. The phone buzzed again, this time Erica's name on the screen. "We can't afford parking, Martin. You're retired. What else do you have to do? Just this one ride." Martin's hands shook as he set the phone back down. He leaned back in the recliner, staring at the ceiling, his heart thudding heavy in his chest. He thought of Janine's voice, soft and firm. "You can't pour from an empty cup, Marty, even for family." At 11:30 a.m., another message pinged, this time from Logan again. "Fine, forget it. We'll find another way. Enjoy your appointment." He could almost hear the contempt in those quotation marks. Martin sat in the dim light until after midnight, the phone dark beside him, his chest tight. He wasn't sure if it was anger or his heart again, perhaps both. The next morning he rose before dawn anyway, out of habit. He brewed coffee, sat at the table with the steam fogging his glasses. The Taurus sat in the driveway, windshield frosted over, waiting like a loyal hound for its master's call. But this time, Martin didn't turn the key. At 9:45 a.m., he buttoned his flannel shirt, slipped on his winter coat, and drove himself, not Logan, not Erica, to his cardiology appointment. The doctor examined him, listened carefully, and finally said, "You've been carrying too much stress, Mr. Lowell. You need to slow down." Martin let out a sound that was half a laugh, half a sigh. If only the doctor knew how true those words were. That evening, when Logan finally called, it wasn't to ask about his health. "We managed," his son said flatly. "But you really let us down, Dad. Erica's furious. She says you don't care about family." Martin held the phone to his ear in silence, hearing his son's disappointment, feeling the weight of years of sacrifice erased by one refusal. "I do care," Martin said softly. "Maybe more than you'll ever know." He hung up before the tears could slip down his cheek. It was in that silence, in the echo of the word selfish, that something shifted inside him. A quiet resolve. Because for the first time, Martin Lowell knew, if he didn't draw a line, his family never would. And maybe, just maybe, that line could be the beginning of something truer than obedience. 2 days passed before Martin called Mr. Dalton. The lawyer's voice hadn't changed in 20 years, still steady, still clipped at the edges as if every word had been polished before release. Then Dalton said, "It's been too long. What can I do for you?" Martin hesitated. The words felt foreign on his tongue, almost shameful. "I want to sell my car." There was a pause. "Your Taurus, the one you've babied since I've known you." "Yes." "Any particular reason?" Martin's fingers traced the leather notebook on the kitchen table. "I think it's time I bought my freedom back." They met the next morning in Dalton's office downtown. The building was old brick, with frosted glass windows and brass handles, polished by decades of hands. Martin arrived early, parking the Taurus in a metered spot across the street. He sat there for a while, looking at the dashboard, the little scratches, the faint smell of Janine's lavender sachet still tucked in the glove box. He ran his hand along the steering wheel one last time. Inside, Dalton greeted him warmly. They shook hands, and Martin felt the firm grip of a man who had carried other families through other storms. "I can arrange the paperwork," Dalton said after listening. "The market isn't great for used sedans, but you'll get something fair. Are you sure, though? A man like you, retired, independent cars are more than transportation. They're autonomy." Martin smiled faintly. "Autonomy doesn't come from four wheels if those wheels only turn when someone else tells you where to go." Dalton studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right. Let's do it." That afternoon, Martin handed over the keys. The sound of the latch clicking shut around the metal ring was small, but in his chest it echoed like thunder. The buyer drove off in the green Taurus, and for the first time in decades, Martin's driveway was empty. He expected sorrow. Instead, he felt something lighter, as though a burden had been unbuckled from his shoulders. The next day, Martin walked to the local transit office. A young woman at the counter greeted him with a rehearsed smile. "How can I help you, sir?" "I'd like a mobility pass," Martin said. "Something that covers bus routes, maybe even ride credits if you offer them." She tapped at her keyboard, nodding. "We have a senior package, unlimited rides, plus discounted credits for taxis and ride-share partners. A lot of folks find it easier than owning a car." Martin pulled a folded envelope from his coat pocket, the payment from the Taurus sale. He placed the bills on the counter. "I'll take it." The woman handed him a slim card, plastic but gleaming. "This will get you anywhere in the city. Welcome aboard." Martin stepped back out into the winter air, card in hand. Buses hissed as they pulled into the station, brakes releasing in long sighs. He watched commuters board, young professionals, weary mothers with children, old men with shopping bags, and for the first time he saw himself among them. Not as a burden, not as an on-call driver, just as a man, moving at his own pace. That evening he cooked himself a simple dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy. He sat at the table, the mobility card lying beside his plate. He picked it up, turned it over in his hand, smiling at its simplicity. For decades, freedom had looked like a set of car keys. But tonight, freedom was a small rectangle of plastic, and Martin Lowell, for the first time in years, felt free. The following Sunday, Martin cooked again. This time, it wasn't pot roast or stew. He chose something simpler, spaghetti and meatballs, Janine's recipe, with basil he had kept alive on the windowsill through the winter. As the sauce simmered, filling the house with garlic and tomatoes, Martin set the table with care. He polished the forks, laid out the mismatched china, and even lit a single candle in the center. When Logan, Erica, and Zoe arrived, the Taurus was no longer waiting in the driveway. Logan raised an eyebrow as he stepped inside, noticing the empty space. "Dad," he asked, "where's the car?" Martin wiped his hands on a dish towel. "Sold it. Sold it." Logan laughed as if it were a joke. "What for?" Before Martin could answer, Zoe tugged at his sleeve. "Grandpa, did you make the noodles from scratch?" Martin bent down, kissed the top of her head, and smiled. "Not tonight, sweetheart, maybe next time." They sat, they ate. The candle flickered softly. It wasn't until halfway through the meal that Erica put her fork down. "So, if you sold the car, how are we supposed to get around when we need you? We can't afford Ubers every time." The words were sharp, but Martin didn't flinch. He reached for the leather notebook he had placed beside his chair. Slowly, he opened it, the pages thick with years of careful handwriting. He slid it across the table toward them. "What's this?" Logan asked. "My ledger," Martin said simply. "Every expense for that Taurus, every drop of oil, every insurance payment, every tire rotation. I kept track." Logan frowned, flipping through the entries. Numbers filled every page, tidy columns stretching back years. Erica leaned in, her face paling as she realized the amounts. "You mean," she whispered, "you paid for all of this all these years?" Martin nodded. "The car wasn't free, neither were the rides. I covered it all, and I never said a word." The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. Logan's lips pressed tight. Erica shifted uncomfortably in her chair. For once, neither had a quick retort. Zoe looked between them, her eyes wide. "Grandpa, you paid for Mommy and Daddy's rides." Martin reached out, squeezing her small hand. "I did, sweetheart, but I don't mind what I gave. What I mind is being treated like I owed it." He slid another envelope across the table. Inside was the new mobility pass, glossy and small. "This," he said, "is my independence. I can go where I please when I please. I don't need to be anyone's driver anymore." Logan cleared his throat. "Dad, you should have told us." "No," Martin interrupted gently. "You should have seen me. A father shouldn't have to announce his sacrifices to be respected." The words weren't shouted. They were spoken softly, almost tenderly, but they cut sharper than any anger could. Erica lowered her eyes. For the first time, shame flickered across her face. Zoe broke the silence, climbing onto her grandfather's lap. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Grandpa," she whispered, "does this mean you have more time for me now?" Martin's eyes softened. He kissed her forehead. "Yes, Zoe, more time than ever." The candle burned low. The spaghetti grew cold, but something unspoken hung in the air, respect, or at least the beginning of it. And for Martin, that was enough. The following Saturday, Martin stood at the bus stop with Zoe. It was early morning, and the winter air was sharp with the smell of rain on pavement. Zoe held his hand, her small fingers warm in her pink mittens. She bounced on her toes, excitement bubbling through her voice. "Grandpa, are we really taking the bus? Like an adventure?" Martin smiled, the mobility card snug in his wallet. "Yes, sweetheart, like an adventure." The bus rumbled up with a hiss, doors folding open. Martin helped Zoe climb aboard and they found a seat by the window. The two of them watched as the city rolled past, bakeries opening their doors, joggers on sidewalks, the wide shimmer of Puget Sound in the distance. Zoe pressed her nose against the glass. "This is fun. You don't have to drive, Grandpa. You can just sit with me." Martin's heart swelled at the simple truth in her words. For the first time in years, he wasn't behind the wheel, glancing at the clock, carrying someone else's schedule. He was just present, sitting beside his granddaughter, free to see the world through her eyes. They spent the day at the Children's Museum. Martin laughed as Zoe tugged him through exhibits, explaining things in her animated way, as if she were the guide and he the guest. He bought her a hot chocolate from the cafe, watched her sip it with whipped cream on her nose, and thought, "This is the time I almost lost." When evening fell and the bus carried them back home, Zoe rested her head on his shoulder. Her voice was soft, almost drowsy. "Grandpa, do you like this better than driving us everywhere?" Martin looked out the window at the fading light, at the reflections of taillights smeared across wet streets. He thought of Logan's sharp words, Erica's dismissive tone, the years of unseen giving. He thought of the notebook filled with numbers, the empty driveway, the card that now rested in his pocket. "I like this best of all," he whispered, "because it's ours." That night, after Zoe had gone home, Martin sat once more at his kitchen table. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt lonely. He placed the mobility card beside Janine's framed photo and smiled. "Boundaries are love with a spine," he murmured, as if telling her, "and love with a spine is what holds us together." For the first time in years, he felt not like a driver, not like a servant, but like a man who had chosen his own road. And to you, dear friends who have walked with Martin through his journey, thank you for being here, for listening, for remembering the quiet heroes in your own families. From Family Shadows, I wish you good health, gentle days, and homes filled with warmth. May your families be blessed, and may every boundary you set be a reminder of the love that gives it strength.